Good evening, everyone. I don't know, but when you think about the developing world, when you think about the third world, we often have these images of that really seem to overwhelm us. We see poverty, we see disease, we think about corruption, we think about lack of access to education and political instability. And over the last 25 to 30 years, when these images have appeared on television and in our papers, it's caused this huge growth in giving. There's just so many people now who do give to international enterprises, and there's been movements like Band-Aid, which have seen millions of dollars being given. And I guess it's sometimes a little bit difficult to tell you that here we are in 2015, and many of these countries are in a worse condition than they were before the international aid ever started. Countries like Africa, you'd find that not only is the gap between the rich and the poor becoming bigger, but in fact the poor are becoming poorer. So I don't know about you, but when I hear that, I feel incredibly disappointed and dejected and perhaps a little bit disillusioned. But I think, can I really make a difference? And then I think maybe we have to just work really differently. I knew this information the first time I went to Africa, and I went to Rwanda. This was back in late 2009, early 2010. I met with a community leader there, and I said to him on the back of this, I said, what are you doing to break the cycle of poverty in Rwanda? He was Indigenous, he was a local Rwandan man, and he didn't hesitate, He just looked straight at me, and he said, well, it's not by giving money, and it's not even by giving food, it's not by giving shelter. It doesn't even start with the children and the youth, it starts with the women. If you help a woman get her way out of poverty, she'll take 5 other people with her. And it reminded me of that statistic, that development statistic I first read in Half the Sky, which said exactly that. If you get a woman out of poverty, she'll take 5 other people with her. I stopped and I paused about that, and I thought to myself, is that really true? Can I really bank on that? And I turned to him and I said, so if you believe that, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he looked at me and he said, you've got to go and see the self-help groups. We've got over 100,000 women in self-help groups. That's crazy. So the next day I drove 5 hours out of Kigali up into this remote area, and I'm driving down this dusty road that I took this picture. It was just like this. And the women were standing on the side, and they didn't look particularly spectacular. They looked sad and they looked hopeless and they looked in poverty. But I kept driving through the town and I came to this open field. And in this open field was where the self-help group met. And suddenly, from the other side of this oval leaps 20 women, and they are dancing and they are singing and they are dressed brightly. And I am thinking, I can't reconcile that with the town I've just driven through. And as I came to them, I sat down on the grass and had an interpreter, and my first question was, has the self-help group made any difference in your life? And they started laughing. They thought I was hilarious. I was being very serious, but they thought I was the funniest woman in the world. And they said, one woman then stopped and she looked at me and she said, it's changed everything. And I don't know, but I was like, what does that mean? And then she started to list the things. They all started. They said, how we feel about ourselves has completely changed. We're no longer alone. We have friends. We've become literate. We've started small businesses. Our children go to school. We have private health cover. And as I'm hearing this list, my next question is, well, why is that happening? What's happened with these outcomes? And another lady, she puts up her hand. She says it's because of the training. For 6 months when we joined this group, we didn't do anything. We had to have a mindset. They keep saying this word. We had to have a mindset change before what we did changed. And as I kind of listened to their stories, and one by one, each woman told me a story. Not one, every single woman told me a story of transformation. And they all led the story with saying, I was a village woman. And they were just telling me, the village you drove through? That was me. I'm not from a different socioeconomic group, that's me. In this first encounter that I ever had with self-help groups, I realised what intuitively I always had known, and I'm sure everyone here knows. Unless people make the change themselves, the change is never sustained. People have to do it for themselves. And in development work, we have the saying which says, we all know it, I am sure, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for what? A day. But if you teach a man how to fish, you can feed him for a lifetime. And I have to wonder, do we really believe it? Because it doesn't always look like we believe that. We can say it. And I don't think, maybe we think it's true for the first world, but I don't think we think it's true. Was that a ding? Oh my Lord. Oh my gosh. We don't believe it for the third world, but I believe it. I believe it for the poorest women in Rwanda. I believe it because I've seen it. And that's brought me here tonight to say, you know what, I believe we can fund this, believe in the capacity of women in Rwanda. And if we give $10,000, we'll give 15 groups. That'll mean 300 women, and therefore that'll mean 1,500 other people will have a change forever. That's only $600 a group as a one-off giving. That's $30 a woman. And you look at me and say, that's just impossible that can make that much difference. But I'm telling you, I've heard not just hundreds of stories, but thousands of stories. And they tell me it's true, and I believe it. And the last story I heard was a woman called Anastasia, and I was there only 4 weeks ago. And Anastasia told me she lives in the mountains in a very remote area. And while she's up in those mountains, she was so ashamed of herself. She never saw anyone. She never washed. She never cleaned. She had one pair of shoes. Her children had one meal a day. And someone came to her and said, come to a self-help group. And she thought, don't be ridiculous. That's not for people like me. Don't start talking to me about savings and loans. But they came back again and she thought, I've got to go. And she went, and that was February 2014. And when I saw her 18 months later, you know what she said? She said, my children all go to school. I feed them 3 balanced meals a day. I just bought a house. I built myself a house with 42 corrugated iron sheets. That's how she measured it. I love that. And then she said, oh, Lordy. And then she said to me, I have 4 goats, I have a cow. I'm a leader of not just my group, but 200 women. And she says, and I have shoes. And I love shoes. They keep my feet soft. And I'm really happy about that.